All right, welcome everybody. Hello. Thank you for being here. This is Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti, and this is episode 119. Tonight, my guest is Shane Davis. We're going to be talking about learning new skills as an entrepreneurial comics creator, which is what Shane is. Yeah. All right, before we bring him on, I want to say hello to those of you in the chat. We got John Henry here. What's up, John? Asian Oh the Time Outlaw. What's up? Hope you're doing well. Andy Go Comics in the house. What's up? The Beanpad is in the chat. How's it going? What Geeks Do Network is here. Says, what up, Pete? Hope you're well. Ready for some Mange Davis. Mad excited for the show. Are you doing call-ins tonight? Because I would love to talk to Shane. We'll be going about an hour on the interview conversation part. And Shane has agreed to take call-ins for about a half hour or so after that. So yes, we will. Nora and Rad, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. Wayne, we got Wayne in the house too. Past Master Dan is here. Says, don't let Shane get me down. What? I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure Shane's doing good. Shane's a good dude. It'll be a fun conversation. Micra is in the house as well. What's up, Micra? Hope you're doing good. Jav Stylor, how's it going? Thank you for being here. Frederick is in the house too. What's up, Frederick? Randy Scribner is here. Hey, Randy. Hope you're doing well. We also have Goody Two Shoes here. Hope you're doing good, Goody Two Shoes. Grey Wolf in the chat as well. What's up? We got Cole King here too. What's up, Cole? Thank you for being here tonight. We also have, let's see, scrolling down. We got Tippy Tail McKitty here. Hope you're doing good, Tippy Tail. Travis Parrick in the house. What's up, Travis? We got Charlie here too. What's up, Charlie? Just can't stay long, but I'll catch the vid later for sure. Hope everyone's doing good. Well, thank you for watching it later too. Jefferson Roswell here too. What's up, Jefferson? Hope you're doing good. Thank you for being here tonight. Word Wizard in the chat as well. What's up, Word Wizard? NXerd, hope you're doing well. Says, can't find my order for King Cryptid. Is it lost in your house? Is it lost in the mail? Send an email to, go to the contact page on alternacomics.com. But first and foremost, check your order. Make sure that there's no other pre-orders on there. If you ordered it with King Cryptid 5 to 9 or other pre-orders, they'll all ship together unless you paid for separate shipping. So keep that in mind too. Otherwise, it will get to you. But if you want to check on the status of it, send me an email at contact@alternacomics.com or go to the contact page on the Alterna site. I'm feeling good, doing good. Thank you, Cole King. Appreciate it. Let's see, we also have Red Centric here. What's up, Red Centric? Thank you for being here tonight. David Springer in the house as well. What's up, Unhinged? We got Brian Suddenly Old here too. Hey. Okay. All right. Let's bring him on. The man of the hour, Mr. Shane Davis. What's up, Shane?
Hello. Welcome myself. The show.
I appreciate you welcoming yourself. That means I don't have to, but I will anyway. Thank you for being here, Shane, and welcome to Comic Book Radio.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while since we've been on stream together, so it's always good to catch up with you.
Yeah, and especially, I think the last time we were on a stream one-on-one was a few years ago. You popped in on Open Mic Monday.
That is right. I remember that now. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and getting to go over the course of your comic career, your history, and your love of comics, and also how that's transformed over the years. You've gone from a successful mainstream creator in the corporate side of it to successful, if not more so, indie creator. So it's interesting to me when I see that happening because I love that kind of stuff. I think this is the path forward, going independent, being entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So for you, let's go back. Let's start at the beginning. In terms of comics, what about comics attracted you to them? And as a fan first, I guess, as a reader.
When I was a kid, I guess it was Spider-Man. There was something about Spider-Man and the Hulk, those two characters. Not trying to age myself, but at the time, the Hulk TV show was out. There'd be a lot of Incredible Hulk activity books, yo-yos, frisbees, stuff like that. Like Hulk was just really getting around. And at the same time, Spider-Man, I would go to like a parade and there'd be Spider-Man balloons, and I would pick up at like 7-Eleven a Spider-Man comic. That would be like, I remember as far back as preschool, there was some type of Spider-Man stencil thing where you would put like a sheet of paper over it and rub a crayon, and you could have Dr. Octopus fighting Spider-Man. Had Secret Wars toys, and there was something about just Dr. Octopus in general and Spider-Man I really liked as a kid, and Hulk, just some of those weird, I mean, looking at it,
Like, is that Doc Ock with the
characters.
green suit?
The
When he had
green
like kind of like the
suit,
bowl
yeah,
cut.
yeah, and the Secret Wars figure is funny because he's got like a six-pack, so it's like fit Doc Ock. He's not like pudgy or anything like he was in the comics. But
That's
I don't know.
right. Yeah, you're right.
Fun and entertaining, and I remember having some Spider-Man comics and stuff. But I really got into some hand-me-down comics from my cousins, which were like Scrooge McDuck comics. So I was kind of getting hit with like Marvel and like DuckTales, Scrooge McDuck type comics, and I don't know. I was in the comics at a young age.
So you were seeing those just out and about everywhere, right? When they were everywhere.
Well, we had like a 7-Eleven down the block from where I was as a kid. So, I'd ride my bike with my, parents to get like some candy, and there would just be comics there. So,
Yeah.
later
Good
on,
times.
I kind of dipped out of comics, but then kind of came back in the comics with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay.
So that brought me back in the comics.
Did you dip out because of a lack of interest, or because other things took more of your time and interest?
It's weird. We moved, and there wasn't a convenience store down the street. So it was really like kind of like I just moved out of the area of buying comics. We had moved to more of a rural area, like out in the country. And so then whenever like my mom would need to go to the laundromat in town, like there was a gas station down the street, and it's funny and cute at the same time, but they had comics, and me and my brother would look for change, and as we're waiting at the laundromat, because some of the dryers had holes in the barrel that turns around, right? So we would take chewing gum and a pencil, and we noticed we'd see quarters in there where people left the change in their pockets, and we would line the hole up. I would get my little brother in the dryer. These were giant dryers, by the way, not like little ones. And we would like take the pencil and chewing gum and line the hole up and get the quarter out, and eventually get enough quarters that we would go and buy comics. So I remember the Archie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic was something that I ended up picking up, and that got me into Turtles was big, so that got me just into that. Then that led me to Mutants and X-Men, and then I became again trapped right back into Marvel because I was really only liking Spider-Man before.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, what's interesting with the Turtles too is recently they just put like a landmark plaque in Dover, New Hampshire. I was up in Dover today, and they've got a thing commemorating the fact that the Turtles were created there by Eastman and Laird and Mirage Studios and that kind of a thing. It's kind of cool that they have honored the Turtles.
Yeah. Side note on that, they were trying to make the house that Superman was created a landmark because they couldn't. It was kind of in the ghetto and stuff. And I remember the Siegel and Schuster estate. I actually donated some Superman artwork for a charity to try to get it noted as like the place Superman was born in, so they could make it a historic site. So then like they would get tax breaks and stuff to keep it up. So it is awesome when they can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know how practical it is if they're in a bad part of town, like, to keep that stuff up.
That's true. Yeah, that's unfortunate if they can't, but that
I
is
know, like,
difficult.
they did that also. I think it was like Baltimore, maybe, with the house Edgar Allan Poe, one of
Yes,
the houses he
correct.
lived in. So they go around and they do that. They make these historic sites of some sort, and I guess they get a tax break or get some money to keep it up
Yeah, to
from the
preserve
government.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So what about comics made you want to start creating them? And when about did that happen?
Ooh. Um. So what grade was it? It'd probably been like fifth or sixth grade. I was already trying to draw my action figures. Like, I would pose them and try to make comic pages in like sixth grade. And the teacher thought it was cute. So she was like, "Oh, you if you do all your assignments, you can work on your comic the rest of the class, and when your comic's done, you can put it in the back of the room, and then when all the kids finish their homework, they can go back and look at the comics." And I was like, so I'm sitting here stressing and drawing like a little like on notebook paper. We didn't have anything but notebook paper and crayons, drawing like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics and then stapling them together and all of this stuff. And of course, my friend comes over and says, "Well, I'm going to write it." And it's like, "I don't need you to write it." He's like, "I'm going to write it." So then I got him like over my shoulder trying to make shitty word balloons up and stuff, and for the artwork. And so I finally get this comic done, and then the other kids want to imitate. So then those assholes do G.I. Joe comics. And then those kids, they draw one little stick figure per page. And they're just flooding the market back there. The whole table's filling up. They ain't even comic book panels. I'm like, ah. That was my first stressful moment as a comic
You
book.
had a whole editorial department in the classroom.
Yeah, they were like flooding the shelves back there. It's like I was dealing. I was dealing. I was dealing with the direct market all over again in sixth grade. It was like that was probably my biggest education in comics. Is like you can work your butt off on a comic, but it still has to get done, or you're gonna get flooded out.
That's interesting. That's I've never heard. I've heard a lot of origin stories for comic creators on this show. I have never heard one. I've never heard one like that.
Well, because they were drawing one stick figure per page, it'd be like, here's Zartan and Snake Eyes, flip the page. Here's Zartan shooting Snake Eyes, flip the page. Here's a Zartan and a headstone for Snake Eyes. It's like this. I was like, I was ripping my hair out. It's like, you guys aren't making comics. They're like, nuh-uh, I'm doing more comics than you. And I'm like, but they're not comics. And I got so mad, I just quit. And then I go back, and the kids took my book and threw behind the cabinet. And this was like a giant cabinet that would need like 5 people. So they were intimidated because everybody was fighting for my book, even though they made 20 books. And then they went and grabbed my book and they slid it behind the cabinet. It's like,
Where
we would
was
need
the
like
teacher
3
during any
janitors
of
to
this?
move it to get my comic back. And it was gone. It was gone. That was it. Nobody could get my comic.
This sounds like chaos in the classroom. Where was the teacher?
And then I gave up on comics at the young age of 6th grade. I was done. I was like, these kids, I can't do it. I can't. It's too competitive.
That's foreshadowing. That's
Yeah.
foreshadowing here of things to
Yeah.
come. Everyone's commenting too about how we've moved now into the PG-13 part of the show.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's
Them
okay.
a-holes.
I told Shane he was allowed one F-bomb if he wanted
That
to
was it.
strategically
And that was
place
not
it.
an F-bomb. That was an
It wasn't-
a-hole.
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, where was the teacher? I'm dying to know.
From the classroom, like,
Letting this
know?
happen?
Yeah. And I'm like, but my comic's back there. And she's like, well, I can't get it out. And she goes, well, make another one. It's like, I spent a whole week. I was staying up at night working on my comic at home. I'm like, you get it out. But this was like a big, like, I don't know, like the whole wall, like this was like a big cabinet. Like there was just no way to move this thing out. We had one janitor in the school. You would need like 3 or 4 grown men to slide this thing out. And it was just like,
So what you're saying is there's a good chance that it's still there.
It probably is. Shane Davis's first comic ever.
All right.
Think about it. Get that slabbed, put on eBay.
I mean, I'm saying, you know, if you ever release the name of that school and the location, you may have
Right.
some
Just
people pounding on
collectors
the
out there.
doors.
And
So,
after that, like I had a lot of kids kind of telling me like mutant turtles aren't cool anymore. Real mutants is X-Men. And then I was like, what's X-Men? And they're like, again, I kind of saw just a bunch of superheroes, like, you know, which I was like, I like Spider-Man and that's about it. But then I saw Nightcrawler, and then they were kind of explaining the whole mutant thing. And X-Men was kind of like a popping book around then. Like this was leading up to Jim Lee's X-Men #1.
so this
So
was
you
like
had
just
like
Silvestri
Wolverine was
time at
good.
that point, or was it
Yeah,
Jim Lee's era?
Wolverine was good. You know, you had Mark Silvestri on it. You had really cool X-Men books going on. You know, Gambit and stuff was coming out. Rogue. I mean, it was right there at that moment, leading up to, you know, the big, what I call like the Image. I don't know, like Rob was coming on New Mutants. Um, Spider-Man was really good with McFarlane and stuff, you know. Dale
Mm-hmm.
Keown was on Hulk. You know, it was just a really good time to be a comic book fan. And
Very
I,
true.
you know, because, you know, as a kid, again, I would buy the books at the grocery store, you know, because there were spinner racks and stuff. You only had so much money, you know, like you know, if our business was dry this week on the digging quarters out of the dryers at the laundromat, you know, it's basically I was allowed one book, you know, I could pick, and then it was like, how, you know, I really love Spider-Man, and you know, there would be like Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man, and then it seems like Amazing Spider-Man. Did I say that? Spectacular Spider-Man. There were like 4 Spider-Man titles out at one
Yeah,
time.
Web, Spectacular, Amazing, and then Adjectiveless.
And then one day I saw Ghost Rider,
Ghost
and
Rider.
that blew my mind. I mean, for a couple of reasons. Ghost Rider and Venom blew my mind because of the word balloons, but how edgy they were. And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to realize comics had, you know, comics isn't just about superheroes. Because I guess in a lot of ways, I like Spider-Man. And Spider-Man's a really interesting superhero because he's kind of like, in a lot of ways, the most bizarre of them. You know, the full mask, his suit, you know, like, if you look back at like Steve Ditko's Spider-Man, he really wasn't even all that muscular. He was just really skinny. um Acrobatic, you know, he's not flying, he does have, yeah, I mean, he was a very unique superhero. I don't know if I liked superheroes in general because again, I was in the Silver Surfer, I was in the Guardians of the Galaxy, like some of these other ideas of comics, whether they be space comics.
Yeah, it sounds like you gravitated more towards sci-fi and horror aspects, like monsters, humanoid kind of characters, not so much cape and tight superhero.
Yeah, and X-Men was interesting because they really didn't have, I really hated superhero origin stories. I really, X-Men kind of solved all that. They're just mutants and they have bizarre powers, and at the time they'd be going into space and stuff. They were doing other things like fighting the Brood or the Shi'ar Empire or whatever, you know. So they weren't even like your normal superhero book. And what then you get Wolverine. I mean, at the time, Wolverine was just a character you could just blow up, you know, and do crazy stuff. I've been looking back through old Wolverine books, and I'm like, how did we lose this in comics? Like, I mean, the Wolverine comics today don't do anything cool with the character like they used to. Um, so the Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X book was another one. I came across Marvel Comics Presents, where I would get Ghost Rider and some Wolverine, like stuff like that was really what I was buying up. I rarely ever anything DC. I remember not liking DC at all as a kid.
That's interesting, considering
Mainly worked at DC.
yeah, your career path. Travis Parrick, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, "Hail Spudfather, my internet friend." I'm thinking that's to you.
Yeah. No.
You're Spudfather. Interesting. So as you're getting out of the classroom and the editorial staff there, and you're getting into the more professional side of comics, how did you pursue that? Did you go to school for that? Did you just jump in head first, being self-taught? How did that come about?
When I got out of high school, I lived at home and worked in a factory like about 60 hours a week and saved up a lot of money to and really tried to keep girlfriends away because they wanted my money. No, but to save up to go to school. So I went to the Joe Kubert School in New Jersey. And I mean, that was, I mean, I worked like third shift, like 60 hours a week, like with a pager as a molding technician, just trying to power save and draw when I could. And I really had these big dreams of making comics. Like I'm talking like the type of dreams and ambitions that would keep you up at night. I really loved comics. I thought comics could basically was just this awesome medium, like that you could do almost anything with. It was like a blank canvas, whatever power of your imagination, stories that, and I really thought like Hollywood could never compete with comics in a way. I still believe that in a lot of ways. But I was so into comics, just the idea of comics. And, I came from a very poor family, where we're digging for change in laundry machines for comics. So to me, like, I really, I was always able to draw better than most kids around me and stuff. So I would try to learn. I was kind of self-taught to an extent from the Brute and Babe sections that ran in Wizard magazine.
Oh, those were great.
They were great at the time, especially when Bart Sears was doing them. There was a lot of useful information in those. I don't know if they've ever made a collection of those, but especially his stuff.
I sworn they did, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, Greg Capullo did some that were really good too. I found to be very useful on panel layouts and stuff like that. They had a lot of guest artists, and every now and then they would have some really big bits of knowledge, but I learned a lot of my basics from the Bart Sears stuff. So I finally got X amount of money together and went to the Kubert School and submitted my portfolio and stuff. And again, I was super ambitious with that. Like, I had a girlfriend of years that I left behind, was gonna do a long distance relationship that ended in about 2 weeks. And it was big life-changing stuff at that age, just to pick up and say, I'm going to take what little I owned, which was like a bass amp, my bass guitar, and my drawing table, and go to New Jersey and try to actually go to school and learn how to make comics. I was
this
a big
is like the Shane Davis story. I can picture like the movie in my head.
Yeah.
Very dramatic, kind of, wait for me. And she's like, I will. And then you're taking your bass guitar and your amp.
Yeah. Well, she was all like, why don't I come along with you? And I'm like, nah. You'll get in the way. You'll get in the way of my dreams. And she's like, wait, I'm not your dream? And it was funny, right before I left, like we were standing in line at McDonald's, and she put her hand in my pocket and tried to slip a wedding ring on me and tried to propose to me. She tried to propose to me. Yes.
Yeah? Wow.
What? And I'm just sitting here thinking, should I get a Big Mac or a quarter pounder with cheese? And she's trying to put a ring on my finger, Pete. That's what women do. Women try to get in the way of a man's dreams.
It's okay, Shane. She can't hurt you anymore.
No, she can't because she passed away. But you know, good
Good
for.
grief.
You're right, Pete. She can't.
The story has
anymore,
taken a dark turn.
Yeah. But anyways, I turned her down. I was like, get that ring off my finger. And Big Mac with cheese, super size. And
So you took your Big Mac, your bass amp, your bass, your drawing table. You went to the
quarter
Kubert
pounder
school.
with cheese.
Oh, your quarter pounder with cheese.
Quarter pounder with cheese.
All right. So you took those and you went to the Kubert school to pursue your dream.
Right.
How was that experience for you at the Kubert school?
It was really different. For people who don't know, the Kubert school has this. I'm trying not to read the chat. The Kubert school had like Joe had a very complex idea of you would juggle about 10 assignments at one time. And I don't know. I've often thought back of the 3 years I spent doing the Kubert course, but what his mindset was that you needed to learn everything. But I get that. You might end up being a colorist, you might end up being an inker, but you know, somewhere in all of this, you're gonna find what you're the best at, and you should be versatile. And also, Joe was of kind of the mindset you should be able to ink yourself. You should at least know how to letter, so you understand to leave room for lettering as a penciler, even if you're not doing that. And but what it also caused is you couldn't really spend too much time on one assignment because you're always off to the next one to turn it in on Tuesday, and then Tuesday night you're finishing up what's on Wednesday, and then Wednesday night you're finishing up what's on Thursday. So you're constantly shuffling stuff, which I don't know if that I don't understand the cause and effect of that as looking back at it. Like I often think back on that, but it was a lot of people just couldn't do it, and the dropout rate was super high.
Well, it seems like they're probably prepping you to get into the industry, no? In terms of the manic schedule.
The manic schedule is one thing, but the juggling pages is very bad when you work in mainstream comics, because it gives you a false idea of what you actually have done. You know, and it can slow up the production line of like that these pages need to go to the inker. Like, so that's where I often think back and I'm like, that doesn't really line up with actually making a comic on a schedule, like shuffling pages like that, like being half done with something, sliding it off and starting something else. That's a really bad habit for artists in general, because any art student or anybody like looking to be an artist, they have nothing but portfolios of half-finished stuff. So I think that's a habit you have to break out of, but that is one thing in his curriculum they actually kind of did, is you touch something, move on to something else, finish that back up later. You know, so you're constantly shuffling things, so you can't get like, I guess, like what I would call like tunnel vision on a piece, because you're always having to, you have like 5 unfinished things you're juggling at one time. The first year is just like getting used to the reps, and then like and then I'd say like 2 is like a lot of growing for some people. And then 3, the second year I was already kind of going up to DC Comics and trying to present my portfolio because I was so close. And making getting some headway with some editors that really left the company shortly after. Dan Raspler, he was like the editor of JLA in like the 90s and stuff. Back with the Grant Morrison run of JLA. Mark Wade.
Was there a reason you were pursuing DC over Marvel, even though you were more of a Marvel fan?
I just couldn't get in at Marvel. I mean, I would still go to Marvel because I was already in the city, I think. And they were just humoring me at that point. I mean, it was a whole different time. It was all about meritocracy and how good your pages are. And then even if you had these awesome pages and portfolio pages, it was also about like, you know, like, can I trust you to do a job? Like there were just so many like how, it ain't even about my portfolio anymore. Now it's about like, like doing some test pages and me getting them in on a certain time and you taking a risk on me. And it didn't seem like there was a lot of anthology books at the time because that was what a lot of people would get tested out on. And
Around what year was this, would you say?
this would have been 1999 or 2000,
Okay.
2001 maybe. So I mean, at that time, the trade boom hadn't happened. So, or it was getting ready to happen. It was like at the cusp of it. So there was fill-in issues. Some of my first jobs at DC Comics was some trading card stuff and what was called inventory stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the monthly schedule, for people who don't know, like they would basically have a story they would keep on file, in case somebody got sick. And these would be one-off stories that they could slide in between issue arcs. Like if there's a 3-issue arc of Nightwing over here and the team's behind, there's an inventory they could always crack open and throw in. And those were easy to take chances on new talent, but they still, like, it was hard for new guys to get those. Like sometimes they would just be guys looking for more steady work and they owe them because of a contract or something. So
Yeah, those are some of my favorites, though, to be honest. Some of the filler stories.
yeah, because they're one and done issues. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
We have a question here in the chat. Let me see. From Eloise. Eloise wants to know, was attending the Kubert School worth it? Would you recommend attending it now?
It's a case by case scenario. That's why I don't like that as a general question. So when I went, some of the teachers I had was like for basic drawing and life drawing and stuff. I had like Sergio Corello. He did the Action Bible. He did Sword of Azrael. Some people around here know him. He was working a lot at DC on Azrael when I was there. So I was actually, I had Joe Kubert the third year. It really depended on the teachers you were getting. Today, the Kubert School is now ran by somebody else and owned by somebody else. So I can't speak about the school today. It's changed a lot in the time, since Joe's passing and stuff. But even at the time I went, I saw some people get a lot out of it. I saw some people go and not really, pursue comics at all afterwards. So, but that's like with any art school. Like, a lot of people will get degrees in art that they never use.
Very true. Yeah. I imagine, too, in that situation, there's got to be a tremendous first-year drop-off.
Yeah, Joe encouraged it, though. Like, he offered, like, really big, like, initial, like, refunds if you dropped out in X amount of time, almost like he was wanting you to quit. Like, Joe didn't want anybody there that didn't really want to be in comics. And keep in mind, when Joe started the school, it was out of his house. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak about it too much because I worked for Joe afterwards. It's not like I ever a little bit with PS Magazine, which was a military comic. But so I know Joe as a teacher, and I knew Joe as like being an employee of Joe. I don't know his ambitions for the school exactly. I know he took a lot of pride in it, but I've always heard his wife Muriel was a big advocate for the school being what it was. So I don't know what his initial ambitions were for the school or how big it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But a lot of DC's production team, from my understanding throughout the years and stuff, were all Kubert grads. Joe always had like a good connection with DC more so than Marvel. For people that don't know, this is just comic geek stuff, but Joe gave Paul Levitz a job. Paul Levitz was Joe Kubert's assistant when he was editor on War Comics. So that kind of always had like a type of respect with DC and vice versa with DC and the Kubert school, and had connections there. Like, you know, so DC, the Kubert school at the time always had students go up to DC Comics for a portfolio review, and the editors, they would put all the students in like a room, and the DC editors would come down and look through everybody's portfolios. And I'm not going to say it was a thing, but it kind of seemed like it was a thing that was almost like somebody at DC would find a job for one student at least. Like there was almost like it was like a Willy Wonka's golden ticket type thing. In hindsight, I'm not so sure how the batting average on that was. I know I did get a job, but I was also going up to the offices and showing my portfolio a year prior to that.
Very interesting. Andy Smith in the house says there are 2 volumes of Bart's Brutes and Babes that we put out. They have new material too. And he says, I have a PDF of the whole Capullo stuff. Yeah, the Greg Capullo's, I believe it was Crash Course. Is that correct? Am I remembering correctly? I think it was called Crash Course.
It was breaking down into some really interesting crops and framing in comic family. And this was all around his Spawn stuff when he was doing this.
Correct, yeah. So once you broke into DC, I'm guessing you didn't.
I didn't. I kind of broke in and then I broke out. Like, well, so I ended up working in licensing for years after I got my first couple of comics, and some of those inventories didn't even really go to print. I think I had one really bad fill-in on a DC issue that went to print where an inker redrew everything. I put down like every face in the book got redrawn by the inker, and then DC got mad and never hired the inker again. But then I ended up with a really bad drawn comic to get work. So I ended up getting effed in that deal also. And I ended up working a lot in DC licensing. For people knowing that still today, I find stuff on the merchandise. I drew like a lot of images that they were just images of Batman or the villains or something. They were for any and every product. So they always had to be in like a very designy shape. And I would have to, really play with Batman's cape, or if it was Scarecrow, like the Scare Gas or something, and really just try to make an interesting designed shape that could be used for activity books. It could be used for products. It could be used for T-shirts and anything and everything. And later on, they would sculpt toys off of these and stuff like that. And it was like a lot of Batman villains like Scarecrow, Killer Croc, Two-Face, Ra's al Ghul, a lot of Batman. And then because the images were so good, eventually then I got pulled back into drawing comics at DC. And it was like doing fill-ins on Batman for Doug Mahnke under the Red Hood. And then the issue came together so good that then they gave me the Batman Annual, which was the big finale of that whole Under the Red Hood, how did Jason Todd come back? And that book was in the top 5 comics. Like, it made a lot of money and went into second printings right away. It sold out, and like I was almost like a hit overnight. Why this is interesting is I developed and cut a lot of my teeth in the licensing stuff that I never really talked too much about, because I was really forced to make interesting images out of characters. I'd spent all these years learning how to do comic pages at the Kubert School and even done some fill-ins. But during licensing, it took away all those assets. Like, I didn't have storytelling there. I didn't have whatever. It all had to be designed. It all had to be interesting images. And so I really became hyper focused on my finishing style, how I drew eyes, how I would draw musculature and things like that. And then I'm drawing all these kick-ass Batman images, and then all of a sudden I'm given just Batman issues, and then all of a sudden like I'm going into second prints. And then from there I would get pulled into I got Mysteries in Space. At that point I had Marvel and DC both fighting over me, just like that. I was nobody. All of a sudden I have Marvel offering me Peter David Wonder Man series, and then I had DC offer me Adam Strange with Jim Starlin. I really wanted to work with Jim Starlin. This goes back to when I loved reading Silver Surfer and all of that stuff, the Infinity Gauntlet, all that cosmic stuff I was reading. I was like, oh boy, I get to work with Jim Starlin. And then I take that job, and then they're like, well, we got good news and bad news. I'm like, okay, what's the good news? Well, you're working with Jim Starlin, and we want to give you a contract. And I'm like, okay, because at this point, DC's afraid that Marvel's going to yank me off the project with a better offer. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the bad news? Well, the bad news is it's not Adam Strange anymore. It's Captain Comet. I'm like, well, what does that matter? And they're like, well, they're afraid I'm going to walk off. They're like, you just have to design your own character you want. And I'm like, okay, great. I didn't really care. I didn't really care if it was Adam Strange or I get to design a character. I just cared that I'm working with Jim Starlin and I get to do some cool space comics.
That's interesting, because I would imagine most people would feel like that's a downside, but that probably plays into the fact that you're a creator as well, because there's a lot of great people who can play with other people's toys, be a good writer, a good artist, play with other people's toys and creations. And then there's other people who, yeah, they could do that, but they also have the touch of being a good creator and coming up with concepts, designs, and characters themselves. So that probably really leaned into your wheelhouse a bit better.
Yeah, it was interesting because I basically got I got to design everything, his suit, which I still see, like Mysteries in Space is still a book I look back to, especially when I came back to making independent comics. I look back to and I'm like, I know I'm a better artist than I was back then, but I want to see that energy. I want to see those crazy designs. I want to see, like Mysteries in Space, for people who don't know, I had one human being, and that was Captain Comet. On this space station that was basically like a place where all these aliens from around the galaxy were in this space station. And so every time I had a crowd scene, it's like whatever alien I can imagine, whatever, so much so I was challenging myself where I would just have like animal magazines. So I would see these bizarre bats or a weird caterpillar or something like that. And I would try to take some weird color combinations or even just elements and come up with a crazy character in the background. Like I was really like pushing myself and looking at some anime design books, animal books. It was just like whatever, a weird fish. I was like, that could be a cool alien. Look at that jaw or something like that. So I was really, visually and art, like as an artist, it was drawing anything and everything that's crazy. I had two things that were grounding rods. I had one human and one dog, one English bulldog called Tyrone. Anything else, like it's whatever I could imagine, I drew. And a lot of times I think in that when I did Starlight Cats and when I did Inglorious Rex, those were two things that I was like, I got to get back to that, because in between all that was the drawing Superman, Batman, was drawing like Justice League, it was drawing Rage of the Red Lantern. Rage of the Red Lanterns is weird though. That one I again designed a bunch of characters and was able to use my imagination when I designed the Red Lanterns, except for Atrocitus was Ethan. And then of course Superman Earth 1 and all of these books, they became more like you're locked in unless they gave me a crazy robot or a crazy alien. it's kind of paint by the numbers. This is what Superman looks like. This is ideally what the model sheet is. I get Earth One. It's like, okay, bust that model sheet and reconfigure it. But for the most part, DC had like a house style. Every character had a generic superhero build. Every superhero had an emblem on their chest. I'd only done a few projects at Marvel, but there is, from a design point, a very different attitude about the characters.
Yeah, DC seems like they are just human flags, that they're living symbols, whereas Marvel, they're more just characters, people, and then however their design is kind of attributed to that.
There's a design element that causes that, and it's the emblems on the chest. The emblems on the chest visually, and this goes back to working in the marketing, forces you to kind of always get the chest out, which kind of forces that same pose of either they're coming at you or their chest is out proud. And then that's a lot of the DC characters, except for Aquaman. Aquaman has like an A on his belt. But if you look at a JLA lineup, they all have like chest symbols. You look at Spider-Man, yes, he has a little black symbol there, but he also has the red symbol on his back. You look at Wolverine, no symbol really. You know, a lot of the X-Men, they're not sporting like symbols on their chest so much.
Yeah, it would just be, I could think of what, Captain America,
maybe Iron Man.
Few of them,
yeah. But I mean, if you even look at them, the rest of their suit is also super designed. You know, like Captain America has that shield, so you can just have the shield kind of charging at you. See, it kind of breaks the formula. DC Comics characters, very I hate to use the word cookie cutter, but when you're looking at it from a design aspect and how you're going to pose them to get the most utility out of them, a lot of them, they suffer from being cookie cutter designs.
That's an interesting observation. So for you, would you say that it's more within your inclination to want to create and design your own characters and your own stories, even at the mainstream level when you were working at corporate, or would you have preferred to be given established characters?
I mean, I think there's benefits of both. There's some comic artists, I'll be honest, there's some comic artists that are not going to be good at being at creating characters. They're going to be better with corporate characters. Some comic artists are really big comic fans. That's how they became being comic artists, and they love these corporate characters. I knew Mark Miller and would talk to him from time to time, and he was a guy that he would even just up and tell you, like, I really wish I'd done more with Superman. Even like at his height on Ultimates, he'd be like, Shane, I wish I was working on Superman. And there's no shame in that. But then there's some guys that they love their characters more than any corporate comic, and again, there's no shame in that. I mean, I was a comic fan first, but in me being a comic book fan, something happened that was a super, I don't know, it was like a big revolution or something like that. I don't know the word I would say or how it hit me as a kid, but that was seeing all these great comic artists that were working on like X-Men, Spider-Man, Wolverine, some of the best comics that I could buy in my whole life at one given point, just upping form Image Comics. And to see that now, not to actually read those Image Comics, because some of them were shit, some of them were really good, and some of them were really hold up, but it was the motion of it, and at the time, and you would really have to live through it to understand it, because this was before the internet. So this is like the talk at the comic shop, the talk in the school, and this is at their high watermark, at the high point. And at the same time, we're seeing things like Death of Superman and stuff like that. So it was almost like there was this dynamic that was happening where the creator was surpassing the characters. Like, because if Superman's dying and these guys are making their own characters, then the power dynamic of character versus creator was it was like somebody flipping the table. And that was happening, and it's not like it happened all at once. I mean, there's little bits of information coming out at this, and again, you have to understand this was not the internet age, and one of the bottlenecks of this information was Wizard magazine. So and of course they were hypercharged on the image because of whatever was going on with in hindsight looking at it, the connection between Todd and I guess the Seamus brothers. Is that
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
yeah. So you literally would have had to go through it to understand the energy I'm talking about. That had an effect on probably a whole generation of creators, and put a bit of knowledge in the back of their head of empowerment of artists.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was a little kid. I was like 7 when that happened.
Yeah.
And I knew something was going on that was special. It was
Yeah,
just
no, it
very
was
different.
special. I wish the image books were, I hate saying this, I wish they had been better, because that's the one thing that kind of held them back. I love Todd. I love Spawn. I mean, I do, but I think his Spider-Man stuff on Torment and stuff like that is still better than the stuff on Spawn. I liked Eric Larson on Spider-Man. I still think his original Savage Dragon stuff is good. Todd, I guess Rob on Youngblood, not so much. I mean, I wish some of those books were more well thought out. After I had some connection to some of these creators later on, and I heard some stories. I mean, it's like a lot of things that happen in American comics, like the New 52, Image. That stuff all had to be kind of slammed together in a few months.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, a lot of these things have always been hindered by not resources exactly, but time. How much time did they have to build these things, before they hit the market, you know? And again,
Yeah. And I guess in some way resources too, at least creatively. You know,
yeah,
if you had writing and editing that was up to par with the art, and then you can have someone to keep it all, which they all eventually did, but it was kind of like too little too late by the time it happened, and getting somebody to keep the schedule going. But at
schedule was
that
part
point,
of it, but did they develop the ideas well enough before they just jumped into it? You know, stuff like that. You know, like it is what it is. I mean, but it's, to me, it still like was infectious to a whole generation of artists, to at least to me. So the idea of always doing creator own was there. I always had the idea of making my own books. But at the time I was getting into comics, Image Comics was like a place where somebody like me would do some pages in Noble Causes, or Patrick Gleason would, and from there Marvel and DC would give us a chance. Image Comics at that time, when I was getting into comics, had now became this very small publisher that had no money, and any creator, like, you were basically working just to get in print, so maybe Marvel and DC would give you a job. Like, the whole dynamic had flipped. So I mean, I always liked the idea of creator owned when I was getting into comics, but there was literally no money for creator owned when I was getting in. The market had you know,
oh yeah,
had
by that
gotten
time, yeah, it dried up big time.
it
I mean,
dried
Image
up
was
for
lucky
creator
to,
owned. Yeah.
yeah, they survived by the skin of their teeth at that point.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel was kind of kicking up on Marvel Knights. They had a resurgence from Marvel Knights at the time, like the Kevin Smith, Joe Quesada, you know, Daredevil. I almost said Deadpool. Daredevil run. That, you know, they were starting to get like a little bit more steam back into their books. DC Comics, I never really understood DC Comics fans all that much. It seemed like they religiously just bought their books, I guess.
Interesting that you'd say that, because Marvel's always the one that people attribute, you know, Marvel zombies would be the derogatory for the fans.
That's true. That is true. But there was something going on with DC Comics, because, and again, I wasn't a big DC fan, so I wouldn't understand this, but there were people that were completing runs. because Paul was afraid to ever like reboot like Teen Titans or something like that. So he would just have Titans. And there were people, even though it was like a comic, like who's buying this? It was like there were people that were buying it to be completists, to have a complete run. And Paul knew that. So it wasn't till like say Dan DiDio came around that things would happen, like let's just reboot Teen Titans, and Paul would be like, no, we can't do that. He's like, but it's selling nothing, so let's reboot it. And the completists will have to just break their heads and then eventually start buying Teen Titans with Jeff Johns, and those things would be big sellers. And before Dan, there was this completist attitude with the numbering. Nobody wanted, like, Hush should have been, in my opinion, a Batman #1, but it wasn't. It was just a random Batman issue, Batman 5, whatever, so the DC
That's
Comics
interesting you
fans,
say that. I always like the number continuing. I hate going back to #1s and
so I
all of
do
that.
too. I'm not going to say I don't, and I don't like the idea of new #1s. I'm just stating there was a different dynamic then at DC Comics during that whole time. And again, I don't understand it because I was not a DC fan. But I mean, I think that was also some of my success rate at DC Comics, was not being a DC fan. So when I did have Superman or Superman Batman or something, I would really try to render the characters outside of their house style. I was kind of being summed up with and pushed in with like Ed Benz at the time and stuff, where I mean, I kind of, to DC fans, I was being called out for being like to Rob Liefeld, which didn't make sense. Like, I would see people talk about the books I was doing and they'd be like, he's so 90s, like it was a bad thing. So there was DC people that liked the house style, which I guess would be a Garcia Lopez type style, that did not like me at all. Like, but I was also selling. Like when I was on Superman Batman, my run, each issue started to go up in sales. Like, which was the first, there was actually an article written where Heidi McDonald pointed that out, that was something that normally didn't happen in comics. But each consecutive issue actually was ticking up, because people were discovering me and people like my flair I had on my style. And it was working, which was great, but it was also a fun run, that the search for kryptonite stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting with the way you talk about that, with the way the marketing, the numbering, the mentality, where they're considering the customer. Because what I mean by that is the fact that they're considering the way that the customer wouldn't want to break a run, that the numbering for them would have been important, and that's why they possibly didn't want to do what eventually they did do. At least Paul Levitt seems to feel that way. Because now I think we look back and we almost wish that a lot of that perhaps didn't happen, and we wish that it did sort of continue with no reboot.
I think during that time at DC, and without going into actual stories, just take my word for it, there was an interesting dynamic between Dan and Paul, and maybe they didn't agree on everything, but they kind of came at things from two different angles, and I think there was a sweet outcome in certain circumstances because of a compromise from both. And but they were seeing things from two different angles, and they were from two different sort of, I don't want to say generations, but they were, I think one had a lot of energy and one had a lot of reservation. And Paul's thing was preserving the characters from the like characters first, creators second. I'm not saying Dan was the opposite, but Dan was about trying to mix things up and make things exciting. Where I think, like in Paul's circumstances, trying to preserve the character so much and
a little more status quo,
history,
that kind of a thing,
he would become kind of, I don't want to say stagnant, but things could become like too complacent.
It's interesting because I think that they could have done both. I think that they could have had the mentality they wanted with both without having to kind of go into the reboot type mentality that happened and then didn't really pan out because it wasn't too much of a reboot.
There's a couple, yeah. Well, they had Crisis before, and I think the first Crisis probably just led that we can always go back and do that again, and they always had it in the back of their mind as a company. And that's before Dan. I think once they did that, it was like, well, we can always fix continuity or bring our characters up to modern times just by having an event like Crisis. Without getting into all that, because I'm not the biggest DC fan to quote that. There was a dynamic that was happening though in publishing, because when I was first getting into comics, it was like, well, they don't need a fill-in. Unless they need a fill-in issue, you don't get a job, because it was about, DC house ads would advertise Nightwing by Chuck Dixon and Scott McDaniel monthly. It literally would say, this is our monthly team. And of course they would have a fill-in or whatever, but the company is being ran completely different, with Mike Carlin as editor-in-chief. Like, every book was they were working 6 months ahead. So like, if I did do a fill-in issue, I would have to wait 4 or 5 months before it would ever print. And he kept everything running as like a monthly publisher, and that was their goal. Something that happened that was an interesting dynamic to the American comic book industry was the idea of collected editions. That caused a lot of headache, because all of a sudden comic editors could be working on 2 story arcs at the same time. So like, a good example is like when they were working on Superman Batman, right, with Ed McGuinness and Jeff Loeb. At one point they were already working with Michael Turner. Was he the second run on that?
I think so.
Let's
I want to say
pretend,
yes.
for argument, it was either him or Carlos Pacheco. I don't know which came second. Doesn't matter.
I want to say
they were working
Turner,
on the next arc at the same time. So the introduction to collected editions and bookstores, and this was all happening with Amazon, right, at the same time, becoming like a place to buy books in the mail. The market was changing, but it was also changing the way people made books. So now, if a story arc started 5 to 6 issues and they're running whatever page count, even odd or odd even, for a spread, had to be maintained throughout a whole run. And until they got to the new trade, could that be reset to be odd even or even odd?
So that's when they start writing more and more for the trade once that took off.
Everything started to become structured for the trade. Everything changed. And I guess I had a different I guess it was Pacheco. I guess I had a different like view of it, because I was the guy looking for work, and now all of a sudden, well, we don't need fill-in anymore because you're bad for the trade, because we need solid runs now. We need 6 issues. And keep in mind, before that, this is probably a detriment to comics at the same time, because before that I would buy like a 2-issue. I remember, I think it was literally like a 2-issue run of Spider-Man where Doctor Doom versus Spider-Man, and Spider-Man gets the crap beat out of him, 2 to 3 issue run, and that was it. It was fun. I'd see Spider-Man fight. Now those same ideas had to be stretched to 5 to 6 issues for a trade. And I think that was a big detriment to the American comic book industry.
Decompressed storytelling, say hello.
I mean, Spider-Man versus Rhino, you really gonna make that into 5 issues? No. He's gonna rob a bank, Spider-Man's gonna fight him, you're gonna have a cliffhanger, some plot twist. Next issue, you get, the Juggernaut comes in and maybe helps Spider-Man for some god-awful reason. I mean, right there is a fun 2-issue Spider-Man comic. make that into 5 issues, now we got a lot of talking heads, got a lot of everything
Yeah,
changed.
now all of a sudden you
Great.
don't even make that issue. You don't
Right.
even do that.
Right. And it changed the whole mechanics of comics for a year and the way editorial looked at making comics. And I I look at it at the time, it was a very good thing because, and again, talking with Paul Levitz, because I somewhere years after this, I'm sitting here doing Superman Earth One, which was trying to go directly to OGN, and that was a whole different thing. But at the time, you had Amazon and you had Borders and you had Barnes and Noble, and then you had the comic shop. You had literally 4 points of selling your book. And when I say comic shop, the comic shop was double dipped because you had the singles and then you had the trade. So you had the singles,
Yep.
which were still making a lot of advertising revenue, like revenue from like M&M ads, video game ads, which would pay for the creative team. Then all the profit from the trade, and that's just in the direct market. Then you had 2 big brick and mortar stores at the time that were stocking the shelves. And then you had Amazon, which was primarily a place to buy books. So it was this really good money market at the time. Now, whether these books sold through or not didn't matter. They were all placing orders. So it was kind of like a shot of steroids. And it looked like there was a new market developed just off of collected editions. But at the same time, I think it took a lot of fun out of action comics. And when I mean action comics, I don't mean like the DC book. I mean like the idea of a one and done, the idea of a 3-issue beat 'em up book,
Yeah,
whether
taking that urgency out,
yeah,
taking that kind of dynamic. Yeah.
a good example, Wolverine versus Sabretooth. That's completely different now because you need 6 issues of that and you need some type of big story. I really only want to see them cut each other's eyes out. That's it.
Yeah.
You know?
Premise, fight.
Right.
Conclusion leading to whatever for the next
Right.
stuff.
Now it
Yeah.
has to be, you have to bring in all these other characters, you have to bring in drama. So it was and again, I had an interesting view of that because I was the guy looking for, I wasn't going to get a solid run. I was a guy getting fill-in issues, and to hear editors just flat out tell me the way they're making books, and like an order just came down from up high. Every book is done this way now. And eventually I was the guy doing OGNs at DC that, Superman Earth One was only supposed to be one graphic novel. That's why there's not a number 1 on the spine of it. Then it birthed a whole line of graphic novels that some were not that successful.
That's interesting. I now that I think of it, I don't remember seeing a 1 there. That
No,
makes
there
perfect
wasn't.
sense.
It was not supposed to be a series. There was not supposed to be a series of graphic novels. It did so
Yeah.
well that DC just automatically said, we're doing a number 2. It wasn't, it was supposed to be a graphic novel. It originally was supposed to be the Ultimates and be monthly. Me and a bunch of artists were supposed to take all these characters, and it was supposed to be like DC's version of Ultimates. And then Paul got mad and said, no, F you, I want original graphic novels because Pride of Baghdad did so well. And again, this was going into the Amazon market and that books trade market. And they were also trying to compete with internet reviews, because every time they would get to a collected edition of, say, Brad Meltzer's JLA, right? But they're hiring Brad Meltzer because they want Brad Meltzer, he sells novels. And they want a trade that sells as well as a Brad Meltzer novel. They get the Brad Meltzer JLA Volume 1 done. They go and they look for big reviews from New York Times or the Chicago Tribune or whatever, real world acknowledgement, right? For prose books.
Yeah.
It's already blown because every guy on the internet has a review out there. So they couldn't get prestigious reviews for it. So Paul was like, well, let's get around the guy on the internet and let's just make an OGN And then the OGN, we run a galley for 6 months before it goes to press. And then we get the prestigious reviews. And then we get to put those on the back of the book. And that was chasing a completely different market.
Yep.
You know, at the time, DC Comics and Marvel were all pursuing like people like Stephen King. They were really looking with the rise of these bookstores putting trades. They were then like, well, what if we get the guy on the shelf over here selling millions of copies to do a comic? You know, they were going after Orson Scott Card. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They were going after
Ender's
him.
Game, right?
Yeah, the guy that wrote Ender's Game. There was a big pursuit, and I feel like all of this, there was some utility to it, but it was also a detriment to fun comics, the things I grew up liking comics for.
Way too much leaning into that direction. And comics has always kind of had a
chasing money though.
Yeah, comics has always kind of had a problem with that though. They always lean way too hard into one direction in terms of, okay, we think we're going to really succeed in this. It's doing well. You know, a certain character. Now all the characters have to emulate this kind of character. Wolverine's taking off. We need Wolverine everywhere. We need more characters acting like Wolverine. Graphic novels are taking off. We need more graphic novels and trades everywhere, and to the detriment of single issue storytelling. As opposed to letting both markets exist and thrive. It seems like they go so hard into one direction, and then all of a sudden they leave a lot of other people behind. And then they want to know where they are. And it's like, well, you don't make comics and stories for them anymore.
But some of these characters, in my honest opinion, were not designed to be long form storytelling characters in a way. Like what I mean is, like, if you looked at like Stan Lee's and Steve Ditko's Spider-Man stuff, you know, it was almost, there was a formula there. It's like Peter Parker, introduction of a villain, some conflict at home with Aunt May needing money, fights villain, back at the Daily Planet looking for money, you know, and you know, they were like almost, some of the first Spider-Man issues are all like single issues, you know. Maybe there would be an overall arc, but you know, there was that, you know, Fantastic Four. I'm not the biggest Fantastic Four like knowledge guy, but like, you know, they seem like maybe a couple issues in a story adventure, and then they're off to some other adventure. Wolverine to me like was a character like that, you know, he was an action character and new bad guys he was always cutting it up with or whatever. X-Men, maybe you could get a big story arc out of it, but you know, this whole graphic novel thing, trade collections, they're different things, was strange, you know. And originally, from my understanding, the graphic novel was basically formed at DC Comics because they wanted to never let Watchmen go back to Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, so they kept
more or less
different.
Yeah.
So there's this just weird winding road of how the American comic book industry went to fund single issues to every single issue now is being made for the purpose of a trade. And some of the characters, I feel, were never designed to be long form story characters. Like I just don't
know that they work really well with episodic one like, and done relatively type of stories with an overarching 2 or 3 plot.
Issues and action. I mean, how long can a fight scene go on for? I mean, Wolverine is a character that's built for action. Like, he's literally built to be blown up and rebuilt, and or grows back or whatever. Yeah. So then you look at Hulk. Like, okay, is Hulk supposed to be 6-issue drawn out dramas, or he's beating the crap out of Wendigo this issue, and Hulk shows up and now he's fighting Juggernaut this issue? Yeah, I mean, what were these characters really designed for, you know? And I don't know, like, I have mixed feelings about it. Like, I'm kind of the idea you can do anything with a comic character, but at the same time, you go and you look at the DNA of some characters, it's like, this character was built for this type of story.
Well, then if you're going to take it into another direction with that, you really have to make sure you're focusing on not just the plot-driven situational elements, but you're focusing also on character development. And that takes a whole other level of writing as well, and also plot structure to allow character development to take place in an organic way.
Now,
Otherwise, if you have constant event driven, you're going to have very little character development, and you're going to have very little organic plot development as well. Everything is just going to be a forced scenario with forced characters being put into a situation that they're kind of almost confused as to how they even got there.
and here's the ironic part of it. I mean, we're at a point where comic sales singles are at an all-time low, pretty much. I mean, I hate saying all-time low because I mean, I'd really have to do research on that. I'm pretty sure they are. And some of these books really aren't selling in trade or collections. So they're still being produced on a model that was, again, for reference, Barnes & Noble, Borders, Amazon kicking in, selling books, nothing else. Amazon was really selling CDs, books, maybe DVDs as it. And then the comic shop selling trades also. So like, you know, like, is Amazon the big marketplace for books today, or your groceries? Like, everything's so changed, but they're still making single issues for the idea of the trade. And I'm not, you know, it's like some of these things, do they make it in trade? Does Marvel Voices make it in trade? I mean, like, I don't know, you know, like it, but they're caught up in the tempo and repetition. They don't understand what started it, and that was a dynamic marketplace at the time and new avenues to sell. And again, they were all pursuing major book publishers to try to siphon their audience to buying comics in a new format, you know. And of course, there were other initiatives that came along in my time in comics, like digital, and I did some digital first comics, wrote and drew some Legends of the Dark Knight stuff. Digital, and I knew the people in digital on like buddy terms. They even would admit digital never worked, as they kept their job trying to do digital initiatives. And that's a whole other thing in publishing that boggles.
Oh yeah. It always seems to be relatively around 10 to 15% of the sales.
But as far as Marvel and DC goes, the short of it is basically it looks like whatever company's coming along and buying you up, whether it's AT&T, Discovery, or even just the CEO, new boss at Warner Brothers, whoever, whenever they come and look at DC Comics, and somebody goes, hey, we have this digital idea that we need to pioneer, it'll cut out printing books, it'll cut out distributing books, and we'll sell it for less, but it's all profit. Sounds really good to whoever's the owner of the company, except it doesn't work. And it leads to piracy and, you know, whatever entails, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same kind of philosophy behind when a lot of them started going, yeah, let's just sell to the direct market with no returns, because we hate seeing those returns come in. And then the newsstand shrivels up, and then the advertising revenue shrivels up because of it too, because now you don't have the numbers to say to the advertiser, this is how many are in circulation. Many selling, they don't care about how many are necessarily selling. That's another metric you could show them, but they more care about what's the circulation, where is the footprint for these books.
And ironically, at the point we are with transmedia and the characters and everything going on, and you know, the way they sell Spider-Man everywhere, but they're least concerned about comics. I mean, that's a big detriment to the American comic book industry. Is the people that own these characters, these mega corporate characters, they don't actually care about the comic sales. And that it shows by their practices. They don't really care. And the lack of caring has gotten them to a point in the media that now they're eating the source material, using the comic as a source material, when they were just taking dumb chances. And they didn't care if Captain America was Steve Rogers, or the Hulk was Bruce Banner, or if Iron Man is Riri Williams or Tony Stark. And now they're funneling that stuff into the media. But the only reason they took those risks and those SJW chances is because they really the companies were like, we don't really care. You guys are like a drop in the bucket to the money we're making as a corporation. You're just there to give us research and
Yeah.
development. And
The comics became like ancillary media, instead of the heart, the driving force behind
yeah,
it.
and it's tragic. It's tragic because I there were the old guard there that were preserving the idea of the characters. Whether you liked Paul Levitz or not, he was there preserving the characters. I remember not me, but another artist having to redraw a panel because he drew Batman picking a gun up by the handle rather than the barrel. And he was like, no, I never want a panel of Batman holding a gun because his parents, and it taken out of context. I think there were a few exceptions to that where Batman was explaining to Robin, we need to know how guns work so we know how to deal with them when people are using them against us or something, or disarming, or the impact of them. But that was the attitude Paul had. Unless there was a reason for it, Batman can't be holding a gun like he would be able to fire it. And that seems like very OCD, but that was a guy who cared about the integrity of the characters and running the company. And unfortunately, I don't see that in any other leaders that came along. Dan to an extent, but Dan also had the energy of shaking things up. So he was kind of chaotic in that sense, which was a good energy to some people, a bad energy to others if he killed a character you liked. I don't know if Joe Quesada, Dan Buckley, Bill Jamis, any of those guys had that type of care over the characters. I feel like that's needed though at every company with these legacy characters. So
Oh yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
my fan idea. As a comic creator, I've always, I look at where I'm at now. I'm making my own comics. I'm not really playing with these characters.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a bit. We're at the 1 hour 20 mark. I can't believe it, Shane. This has been great. So now you're making your own stuff. You're not just publishing. You're writing, creating. You're drawing. You're doing so much on it. You're developing a whole new skill set as a not just a creator, but as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. What has that been like for you?
I don't know how I would sum that up. I mean, daunting. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
that's
it's
fine.
it,
It's
it's
scary
it's
as all hell.
it's scary as all hell because I mean, I understand how comics work. I had lots of conversations with like Bob Wayne when he was at DC Comics at Wizard Cons and stuff at the bar. I mean, I got to know a lot of the mechanics of comics, the hype men that would be up on stage, whether it be Ian Sattler or Dan DiDio. I mean, for good or bad, obviously I saw how the sausage was made. Um, so with crowdfunding, I mean, obviously, I've had a lot of fortunate friends here, whether it be John or Ethan or Billy Tucci and stuff. Who Billy, comes from the independent side of comics all throughout most of his career. I mean, it's creator-owned comics is very laboring because I mean I'm still having to put in all the work, if not more work, on the pages I draw. I'm writing more, but I did write when I was at DC Comics and wrote at Image and stuff like that, so it's not my first rodeo there. I feel like I'm fortunate in the sense I've worked on graphic novels like OGN, so I knew I understand this one and done storytelling. I did some one shots at 36 pages and stuff. So I've done the one and done storytelling, whether it be 128 pages or 36 pages or whatever. Like I've done it, or even 48 pages. So, I mean, I'm fortunate in that, but the selling, the hype, like I have to factor that into my output now. Like if I have a schedule, I can do this many pages a week. I have to go, am I campaigning? Okay, well, that's going to affect my output. Am I closing down? And then, of course, the network, somebody's closing down the campaign. Well, I have to be on this live stream. I have to show support for their campaign because they show support for mine. I mean, those are weird factors that it's a lot. And now, we're getting ready to release some covers that we're going to sell hopefully next week. Me, John, and Ethan, that are a connecting cover that are for the goal of going out and getting back on the street at, like, say, Comic Cons, and we're wanting to buy a big booth and a big presence if these things fund well enough. And that's a whole different dynamic that I'm now wanting to throw in the mix and talk to John a lot about, and that's getting, like, boots on the ground type thing, and plant this great stuff we built and take this network and actually just slam it right down in front of people walking by. Because I feel there's people walking around with my Superman shirt or this or that, and there's nothing for them to buy. This stuff is shit that Marvel and DC puts out. Sorry. This stuff is crap and they can't buy it. But what if you plant this in front of them? Now, were they attracted to the character, or are they attracted? And the characters are being destroyed, whether it be Jonathan Kent Superman being bisexual or whatever. But what if you give them a quality book and you plant that right in front of them? Yes, it's a brand new character, but were they attracted to the characters, or were they attracted to the quality of books that were being made? And that's a coin toss. But it's a coin toss I'm willing to take. And so we're getting ready to do this initiative, and that's going to be a new factor if that works. If this works where we can get there in front of people and we can plant down, unifying our resources and put a quality product on a banner in front of these people, that's a whole different dynamic to crowdfunding and finding people. Because a lot of comics guys, maybe they're not on YouTube. That's something we have to say to ourselves. How many potential customers are there that are not dialed into this YouTube network? And what if we can now pull those guys into this YouTube network? And I'm willing to put the risk and chance and work of going and doing that right now. And I feel like it's worth that being thrown into my schedule. But I'm going to be honest, all of this I went from doing 12 issues a year to maybe I'm lucky if I can get 64 pages and a bunch of covers done a year. I mean,
because you're doing,
there is a lot of plates I'm juggling that I used to didn't have to juggle.
Yeah, because there's every single time when you're going into it, you're the creator, you're the writer, you're the production, you're the promotion, you're the shipping, you're this, you're that.
Everything.
So when you're running one department, every other department closes. So it's that level of it that I think it's very difficult for some people, not most by a long shot, but some people, to understand sometimes the time intensive quality of how much is involved when you're running everything. Because do you have a staff? Do you have anything like that?
I have an Asian wife and I work for her basically.
So you have a staff.
I am the staff. You're talking to the staff. No, I mean it's even like fulfillment.
I hear you.
That in. If I'm lifting boxes and I'm stuffing Gemini mailers, I'm not drawing pages. Now, luckily, writing though, I mean, I can be on the treadmill or something. I can be thinking of story ideas, or in the shower, or grocery shopping, and I can just let ideas and stories brew. That's a little bit different. I can multitask with that. But when I have to actually come to nailing down dialogue, everything shuts off, ideally, this probably goes back to me being at the Kubert School. I'm now back to shuffling things rather than just finishing one thing. Like right now, this is what's going on with me right now. I'm finishing up like the last X amount of pages on Inglorious Rex, like probably the last fifth of the pages or something like that. They're all laid out, and I'm finishing those up. I'm still going over inks at the same time, because after Yancey's done, I want to go over them and touch some stuff up in the computer. At the same time, I'm also have artists working on the Inglorious Rex 3's campaign with supplemental stuff. Some are already done, some I'm trying to get started, some are already in the works on something else. I have 3 different artists working on that, so I'm scripting that. I'm getting ready to dialogue and start dialoguing the supplemental for Inglorious Rex too, because that artwork is completely done and it needs to go off to Eric Weathers for lettering. So I'm juggling all these. I'm at this point where I'm juggling all these things, and pretty soon I'm gonna be dealing with like printer quotes and all of that stuff, and try in pre-press. It's a lot. It is a lot. So when people have a late book here or there, that's why you rarely ever hear me say anything about it, because there is a lot to do in crowdfunding. I wish it was simple. I wish it was like putting books out at Marvel and DC, but it's not, because these books aren't going to promote themselves. These books aren't going to sell themselves. I do a YouTube show, Pimp My Comic, where we bring people on, we advertise their books. I still have to work on my own YouTube channel. We do Ballers every Friday, which is a fun show for people to hang out and buy our wares and have guests on and stuff like that. Then there's the YouTube community. You want to network as much as possible. I mean, if I'm just talking by the numbers, these are all things every crowdfunding professional has to do. You cannot do them, but you'll reap the benefits or rewards or failures of that not doing it. I mean, and that's what I do love about this. And what draws me to it so much is the networking, the idea that like it's comic creators working together for once, because in mainstream comics, creators do not work together. If anything, they try to slit each other's throat for a job. It's a whole different thing. These guys only work together when Marvel or DC makes them work together.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. With all of that said, though, would you ever go back working for Marvel or DC?
No, and this is sad. If crowdfunding comics doesn't work out for me, I'm going to do something else, and it probably won't be comics. This is my last attempt at comics, and this goes back to Little Shane drawing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic in 5th or 6th grade to now. I'm at the, I feel like I've I will do some other job. I worked in factories and stuff before. I will go do something else if this doesn't work out. Like I don't see me going back to mainstream comics. There's tons of reasons for that. And I hope crowdfunding works out for me. I take none of this for granted. But I have no intentions of I want to word this correctly. I have no intentions on becoming a work for hire comic artist again. Like, if that means these are the last comics I make, so be it. Like, I'm at the edge of a cliff here. Would I want it any other way? No. This is how I want it. I'm at the edge of the cliff. This either works or there are no more Shane Davis comics. That's it. This is all or nothing for me. And I never said this publicly, but I mean, I'm not scared to go get a real job. I'm not gonna sit here and wrist ring or hold my guts and have nervous panic attacks that comics isn't working out for me. It does or it doesn't. I have so many years of trying to learn the craft of comics and execute the craft of comics. And I've been around comics so much that if I can't get this to work, then it just doesn't work and I move on.
I hear you. I do want to clarify your words, though, or maybe even change them by saying not a real job, a different job.
No, I mean, comics is a real job. But I mean, I've loaded trucks. I've had really hard physical jobs in my life. I've been a machine technician on a pager, working 60 to 80 hours one week. I've 7 days a week, in a factory. I mean,
do you see anything like that happening for you, though? Do you see comics not working for you?
Sure, I do. But I mean, that's just because I'm a realist. That doesn't mean it won't. But I mean, I don't know how to explain it exactly. I mean, I'm here because I want to be here, but I can't make this work for me. I can put in every effort. I can put in every technique I've ever seen anybody do, every technique I've ever learned. I can try to present my work and get out there as much as I can, but I can't make people buy my book. I can lead people to my book. I can do that. I plan to do this as long as I can, but within reason. Like,
Very interesting. So
but
when you say
I
you
mean,
wouldn't go work for hire, now obviously you're
okay.
talking about the big two. Does that mean that you wouldn't go work for hire in terms of, let's say, if I wanted to hire you to draw a book, that you wouldn't do that?
So this is a interesting thing, and I'm not trying to angle this in any way or another. I'm at a point now where, like, I mean, I can't wait to do a cover for somebody who can do a cover for me in exchange. Um, uh, it could be a one-off cover, but I mean that I'll do for somebody for cash or something like that. But the way crowdfunding works is this is and I don't know. I hate the term "scratch my back" and I'll scratch your back, but there is a type of communal type thing. I'd like to think of it as more like Amish people coming together to build a barn. There's more of a community effort to make things work that I really like and I appreciate about Comicsgate and I appreciate about the crowdfunding network. I really like that. That is something that interests me a lot in this. At the same time, I don't want to get caught up in this idea. I do something for somebody and then I expect them to do what I would do for them, that I would return the favor. And I don't want to set myself up for disappointment in other people by expecting them to have the same practices or standards that I would, or the same, I hate to, I'm not trying to use the word morals, but the same principles, I guess. The And that leads me to the work for hire thing. It's like, yeah, some big YouTubers could come along with a pot of money, and without naming names, one did and tried to hire me to do their book, and right away I was like, no. And somebody within our group was like, well, why would you tell them no? I'm like, because I'm just going to get a page rate. What's in besides that? What do I get out of it? It's not like I'm getting royalties. It's not like I'm getting a stake in the character or something like that. And you have to understand, I come from like 20 some years of doing this, and some people, YouTubers that I've even been around, would spit at me and kick and thrash at me like, what's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you do that? What, you're this, you're that. It's like, go elf yourself. I've done it for 20 plus years. I will go back to loading trucks, washing dishes, something, if this doesn't work out, but it won't be working for you.
I get where you're coming from. I mean, I've been doing this for 17 years and I've never worked for the mainstream. I don't have any plans on it at this point. I didn't have any plans on it past the first year of being independent. So I completely get where you're coming from. And man, I respect that. I respect it. It's tough to find that mentality, Shane. It's difficult. And
Well, I mean, I've
I
put
wish you all the
myself.
success in the world, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's nothing against work for hire. I mean, I have like tons of people do work for hire stuff for me, and I've done
Yeah,
it a
I get it.
lot. And work for hire is a great place to learn a lot. Learn and get out your mistakes on somebody else's dollar, not your own. If you can. Like, take somebody else's money and get on your level,
Well,
you
again,
know.
it's I honestly think it's because at the heart of it, you're an entrepreneur. There's a certain mindset, there's a certain attitude towards that way of being.
And I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, but I'm also jaded. I've had a lot of bad
What entrepreneur
experiences.
isn't?
Yeah. Well, there's that.
That's kind of what fuels the path sometime, you know. You're constantly proving yourself. Whether you were jaded within the workplace, whether you were jaded by family or parents or friends or former friends, whoever. It's kind of like that superhero trauma, and you're dealing with it in which the way that you can. And it seems like for you, where you're like, I'm all in, and this is how it is. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I'm giving it my all right now while I'm here and doing what I'm doing. I'm not, 1 foot here, another, there or whatever. I'm fully committed.
So
And if it doesn't work out, then you gave it everything you got.
a different thing that a lot of people don't, I think it gets lost with me a bit, and Ethan will bring it up time to time, but I don't think it really gets people like appreciate it, is I came into crowdfunding and Comicsgate, like, working with the publisher of DC Comics on a monthly title. And basically I was going to be owed a big favor. And I just said, I mean, I was basically working on Metal Men because my friendship with Dan. That was pretty much it. I really didn't have a lot of draw to that book or those titles. I didn't. I did want to try my hand at doing a monthly title and just see if I can make a difference in the American comic book industry by just knocking 12 issues out a year, and seeing what my quality level would be at on that schedule. Because just so I could say like, hey, I did a monthly. It was really bizarre. I felt like that, and I questioned that today why I felt like that. But I decided, like, I put myself in a sink or swim scenario. Like, I burned a lot of bridges. I burned like this. I came here like to die pretty much. I mean, like, this is my elephant
Shane
graveyard.
Davis's
Like,
last stand.
no, but it is. It's like, this is where I'll die at as my comic career. This will be my crowdfunding will be, and the books I make. I have no intentions of going back to Marvel or DC. Now, if that came up to me with some insane offer one day and stuff, that would be a different factor. But as far as I know, like, that day's never coming. I don't expect it. Like, this is my, like you said, last stand.
Wow, very interesting, man. Great. Okay, we got let's make it a 2-hour show even. We've got about 18 or so minutes. I'm gonna put the link here in the chat. If you guys want to join, come on the show one at a time. And if you got a question or comment for Shane, please let it be known. So there's the link right there. You guys can join. Don't be shy. And we'll be going up until the 2-hour mark. So we might have to cut you off at some point. But
Yep.
we'll try to stick to that. Because all the things we just said about doing our own businesses and everything else that's involved. We got one guest right here right now. We got Rob Solo. What's up, Rob?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey man, how's it going?
Good. Pete, I'm a big fan. Shane Davis, you are my favorite gator. I love watching you on streams. You're hilarious. I think you're extremely entertaining. I had a couple questions. When it comes to the creative process of Nine Lives and things that you're writing right now, how much are you involved with the writing process? How much is Yanzi involved and like other writers?
So we have a Starlight Cats. I'm going to take that out of the equation because that was kind of like brewed for years between me and her back and forth. With Inglorious Rex, I'm kind of like an idea man, and then I'll throw the idea at her, and then she'll give me a rough pass, and then a script. Like this happened with a supplemental script just last night. And then she'll break it down into pages, and then I want to go over those and tell her, well, you have a cause here, but you don't have an effect, and restructure and explain what needs to happen and why it needs to happen. And then we go back and we form a script out of that. And then we like to keep it loose for an artist, whether they want to work tight, like panel breakdowns, or they want to work plot. We'll accommodate both. And then once the artwork's in, and we usually approve roughs and stuff, that's where again my artist hat will come into effect. I might change something, and then from there we'll do the dialogue, and we'll make multiple passes. I'll go over it, she'll go over it, so in the end it's very co-written. That's why she gets co-writer, but I am trying to make her understand this scripting process more and why things have to happen in a certain way. Like you dropped a ball here, you didn't show the effect of this happening here. We need a panel of this effect, or it didn't resonate with the character.
I gotcha. If I was a first-time buyer of any Nine Lives comics, from your personal point of view, what would you suggest picking up? And being a comic reader already,
So that's weird. When I did Starlight Cats, I knew it was going to be a hard visual sell, but I also wanted this book that was like, for me as a kid, Scrooge McDuck, where it was like you can hand it to anybody, whether it's an adult or it's a kid. So I always like kind of want to point people to that, but I understand the general comic reader, which would be me, likes monsters and they like anatomy and stuff like that. So even though I'm not doing superhero books right now, except for Extend, I kind of want Inglorious Rex to kind of be that thing, but no, there is violence and language in it. So I try to cover both bases. Ideally most people buy Inglorious Rex, but you'd be surprised at the people that still pick up Starlight Cats today.
good to know. Are you planning on expanding Nine Lives, hiring other artists and writers like for the future? And if so, are you going to have submissions and whatnot?
So I have and we have like artists we hire for supplemental stories with Inglorious Rex. Inglorious Rex 3 will have a book added to it that is an Inglorious Rex book that will be in that campaign, that will be a book on its own showcasing another artist. Like it won't be a supplemental, it'll just be a issue specifically about Alex's brother Nate, going back and showing him fighting and basically in Alex's role that you have in Inglorious Rex 3, but completely different. So it's kind of like a I don't know, a beginning point or whatever, like for some people. But I am doing that, but I'm going to be doing it as part of Inglorious Rex's 3 campaign. Now I could do that book as its own campaign, but because the way crowdfunding works, I want people to get the most out of their shipping rate. Yeah. So I'm just going to include that in that campaign, even though it's its own title, its own book. Awesome. I would like to do more stuff like that. The reality is I don't know how much things would sell if I didn't draw them. Like that, I haven't tested that exactly.
Yeah, you're an amazing artist. Thank you so much for taking my questions.
Yep. But artists always submit. I will say that Nine Lives has a contact tab, 9livescomics.com. I'm always, looking for submissions. Writing submissions is a bit different because I'm not really looking for ideas on any of my established characters or ideas. If you have a book, I would read that book if you want me to look at it. But right now, we're not really looking to hire any writing submissions or anything like that.
I gotcha. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Don't quit comics, Shane.
I'm not quitting comics. It's just
I know. I'm just saying, man. I love your stuff. Like,
thanks.
You're awesome.
Keep
it up. I always watch you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob. Have a great night, buddy.
Take care, guys.
We got a question in the chat. Now, if you guys want to join, again, here is the link. It's in the chat right now. There's a question in the chat from Rain7. It says, will you at least teach Shane, or will you just walk away from the entire business?
I always had when so
in that worst case scenario, of course.
I have mixed feelings on that. So I could have taught for years, from my understanding, at the Kubert School, because I lived next to the school for years, working in my and I never did. I would go in and I would do like presentations or come in and talk to the class about stuff. But it's real easy for some people to go out there and fashion themselves as a teacher and read off some PowerPoints that they read from a how-to book somewhere and pretend they're teaching. My problem with teaching, and this might be me being jaded, is there's a lot of people that try to frame themselves as a person of knowing, and they go out there as trying to present you information that they either cribbed somewhere else or something like that that maybe they can't even do. And I've had good
Like an
teachers, and I've
expert
had bad.
without experience, that kind of a thing.
Do what?
An expert without
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. So and in going to school and stuff, I had a lot of teachers that would teach a lot, but if you're like, hey, can I see where you use those techniques? They really don't. Or if they did have material, they never capitalized on those techniques. So I mean, and I've really been into kickboxing for since like 2010. I've taught kickboxing classes. I mean, I've taught on different like levels to some degree, and I'm just not comfortable with it. Like I'm just not, because you're always handling somebody in a class or something. Of course, online would be different, but like I just don't see myself teaching.
Would you be more in a capacity to work on a book as a hired editor or something like that? Could you see yourself doing something like that?
Yeah, I mean, art director, or editor, or something
Yeah.
like that. It's just, I feel like there's just too much going on in my head. Like, you know, like we're sitting here talking about marketing and comics and the history of comics and stuff like that. It's like I just feel like things would just start spilling out everywhere, you know. And if I was hired for one aspect of the business, I would then start being concerned with other aspects of the business. And I feel like that's where I would either be stepping on somebody else's toes, or they're stepping on mine, or I just get frustrated with my one department and the other department's stepping off over here. And I just don't know if I would ever work well like that. Like, I mean, it's not that
I
would
getcha.
be it, you know.
Difficult to compartmentalize
Yeah.
when you have a wealth of knowledge and experience. I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I get it.
And
Again, if you guys
there's
want to join the show, there's the link. Question or
and,
comment there for Shane.
and with teaching, I mean, you know, there's always the person that's just there that really, you know, they're not there and they kind of hold the class back, or they disrupt, and you know, there's always that aspect there.
It's interesting. I feel like there's every single thing you think of in terms of a concept, you have those like little maps that go to like yes, then if no, then yes, then no, then no, then it's this whole big idea map that spirals out into all the conceivable possibilities. It's probably what lends you towards storytelling, being able to do that. But it feels like because you're considering all of the different outcomes that could possibly happen in any given scenario, which I find very fascinating. Not a lot of people do that.
So this is a good example that rots in my head a lot. I would go to Singapore and live, and there was a gym there, Onyx, I would always go to because it was down the street, a Muay Thai gym, and it was, you know, really cool because they had a lot of like Thai fighters that had injuries, like a torn rotator cuff or something like that. Not like they got beat up, but they pulled something and they couldn't fight. So I would end up, it was really awesome because I'd end up with all these Thai fighters, you know, teaching techniques, and they all come from different camps, whatever. So the guy that owned the gym, he told me, like, eventually he was friends with me because I was an American, and he was in the Air Force, so he went to a lot of U.S. bases and stuff like that. And he pulled me aside. He's like, "Let me tell you my story in Muay Thai." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Well, I was 17. And let's pretend he's around my age." He's like, this is before the internet. He's like, "I went to Thailand. I had this phone number, went to a Muay Thai gym. Muay Thai gym was Fairtex." For people who know, Fairtex is a boxing gear. You've probably seen Fairtex shin guards, Fairtex, whatever. But they originally were a gym, not a product. Now they're a product. They're still a gym too. There's documentaries out there. But so he went to Fairtex and he tried it as a fighter. He wasn't a great fighter. He was a better trainer. Then he went back to Singapore. He did his time in the Air Force, and he opened a gym. And he was like, "Let me tell you about Muay Thai." He's like, "Muay Thai, before my trainer, there was a monk," and we're going generations back. And I'm like, "A monk?" He's like, "Yeah, a monk." He's like, "The monk sat there," and he's like, "You know what he told me?" He's like, "Muay Thai was watching one guy beat the crap out of another guy, and then learning from it and building a technique off of that to defend or beat another guy. So my point in all of this is it was basically a formed martial arts, which came from another martial art called Muay Bran. All of this is techniques built, recorded by a person, not a trainer, in this case to him, a monk. And a monk before that, just watching men beat the crap out of one another to the point where taking that knowledge and building off that knowledge becomes technique and a martial art that even goes out there and influences the UFC, which again is another combination of martial arts building off of one another. The point in all of this is that's comics. Comics is nothing but techniques discovered through trial and error, built off of more techniques, inspiration, all of this. And comics is at a point in time where nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about the great comics. Nobody cares about the great layouts. Nobody cares about the great storytelling or any of that today. And to say I'm going to be a teacher when nobody cares about past techniques just seems like a waste of time.
It's counterintuitive in a way.
It's just that, and then maybe again that's jaded shame, but it's like I'm sitting here every day going through see my omnibus going through old comics that I've forgotten. I was looking at I was telling John the other day on stream, I'm going back through and I was looking at some Adam Kubert layouts. And
while you look for that, I am going to say though that to counter your point, I think that's why it's needed now more than ever before, to show people how a lot of what came before, a lot of those masters within comics need to be not just appreciated or learned from, but just even read, viewed. There's a lot of people that have no concept whatsoever. And I mean, you don't have to be a teacher necessarily I wouldn't recommend that, but I think no matter what happens for you, I think you're still going to do something within the realm of comics. Even if you're doing something with YouTube, even if you're doing a cover here or there, or a trading card, or even if you take 5 years to do an issue or something, I still think no matter what, if I had to wager, I think you love it too much.
No, I do, but who's listening? Who's really out here wanting to make a better comic? Who's out here wanting to
Shane,
lead? I went into comics.
Hundreds of people, Shane.
I went into Marvel and DC, and I think I even heard Ethan say this once. I'm going to leave the comic industry a better place than I entered it. I'm going to leave it better than when I entered it. A lot of us went out there. I mean, I remember talking to Frank Whiteley when he was working on All Star, because we had some of the same editors, and Frank Ben Deegan's his real name. Frank Whiteley wanted that awesome trade. He didn't care how late his book was. That dude busted his head open on All Star Superman trying to make this combination book, of collected issues that would stand the test of time. There was this creative point where a lot of us were trying to make that one awesome trade. We were something that would stand the test of time. Why? For our ego, sure, but it was going to...
It's your legacy.
But it would be something for people to build off of. And instead, the comic industry declined rather than build off of we were building off the people before us. Nobody built off of us. Instead, everybody came in and destroyed off of us. And I'm not trying to say there's part of me broken on the hopes that comics will be this bigger, better, beautiful thing, but I lived it. It wasn't. It invited a bunch of SJWs to come in and just destroy off our backs. Nobody built off of us.
How about this? Comics not as an industry. Because comics as an industry that we're largely talking about on that respect would have to do with corporations, which are now subdivisions of mega conglomerates, and they could care less about comics as an art form, let alone as an industry. But comics as a medium, comics as an art form, there's tremendous potential still, and there's tons of people. It's very obvious. We see it every day. Tons of people.
Yes, as the art form.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the lifeblood. People go, retailers are the lifeblood. Retailers are the lifeblood maybe of the industry as a corporatized entity. But the readers are the lifeblood. They're the ones that keep us being able to do what we do. And they're out there. They're screaming for great stuff. And then among those readers, among those masses, are those creators that are out there that just want to be shown the way. And that people like you, there's hundreds of them, are showing the way, whether directly or indirectly. So I'm a little more hopeful about the situation, I suppose.
I feel like for me, and this will make more sense, the most I can do right now, and keep in mind, there was a Shane Davis a few years ago that thought it was my duty to try to, instead of doing 6 issues a year, spread myself thin and do a 12-issue monthly just to see if I could be some sort of inspiration to my peers to get out more on a monthly situation. That it is possible. Maybe I won't be 100%, but maybe 80% times 12 times a year would be inspiring to others. It wasn't. And now that was a fool's errand I look back on, but that was my, I've always had, like when I took Earth One, like when I took the Earth One deal, I cut myself financially and I knew it, but I did it and because I couldn't sell originals for a year and a half, and 2, I would be off the shelf for a year and a half, a year to do the book, and then 6 months for Galley. So I literally sacrificed. I took a coin toss of whether that was going to work out. Now it worked out really well, but everybody around me that even knew I was doing it thought I was doing career suicide. Even Dan tried to pull me off of the book at one time. I was 40 pages done. And he's like, I'll let you write and draw Superman, Batman, for a whole story arc. You want Man-Bat, you want this, just leave Superman Earth One. And I declined because I thought it was important, because I thought it would change things in a positive way. And I did that so many times in my career that, like, I'm at a point now, the most I can do is take anything I've learned and anything I can appreciate that other people learned and I can build off of and build my own books. And if this works, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. It's like, I mean,
out of your hands.
Now that doesn't mean I'm not 100%. That doesn't mean I'm not putting in 100% effort and 100% energy and 100% enthusiasm on my books. It's the complete opposite. That frame of mind forces me to give 1,000% to every book I do right now. Because if I don't, I die. Okay, if I
absolutely.
don't,
give till you got nothing left. I absolutely get that.
It's sink or swim in crowdfunding for me right now. Now, am I okay if I don't make another book? Part of me is absolutely not, and part of me is like, I made a lot of books. The industry, the direct market, what comics were when I came into being a fan. I know it's dead. And if it's not dead right now, it's in hospice. It's on its way out. I firmly believe that. Between corporations owning these characters, their interest in these characters for everything else but comics, what comics are now, it's not about. I mean, it's not what it was, and it can't return to what it was. It has to become something different. It has to become something different.
Yep.
And I feel like crowdfunding is this big new thing, sure, but it's a big transition too. Like I don't feel like this is a
this is not the end game.
Crowdfunding is a destination. I feel like it's an evolution, and something again will be built off. Going back to the Muay Thai analogy, something's going to be built off of this.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. No, I 100% agree. Michael Deach, thank you so much for the $5. Says great interview. Thanks for bringing us the missing pieces of the Shane Davis story. There you go.
Yeah.
And Aloise wants to apologize to you. Says sorry about shouting at you on Twitter that one time.
You're okay.
There you go.
I remembered that every morning I wake up, and now I can take your name off the list.
Just cross it off like Steve Buscemi and Billy Madison. Shane's putting on the lipstick and just staring up at the ceiling. Yeah. Feeling more content now. We got one person waiting in the green room, and then we're going to take Just one more question, and then we're already over the 2 hour
One
mark,
more.
and then we're gonna end it. So here we go. Travis Parrick, you're on the show. What's up?
What's up? What's going on?
Hey,
What's going on, Travis?
Hey, what's happening, Shane? Just a real quick question, then I'm gone. When you got like canceled for your Exin book, right? Then did you go to like the warehouse to get to pick up the rest of the books? And then they just throw them away? And if they did throw them away, did they ever reimburse you for those copies?
So for people that don't know, Extend is was an image book that I'm recoloring, relettering, re-inking, and drawing new pages for. You can go back it now. When I became Comicsgate, I had not just the creators say I couldn't reprint their work, meaning the colorist, the letterer, stuff like that. Image Comics pulped the book. They basically destroyed what was in the warehouse. And I guess you can still buy some old copies of it, but don't worry about it. I am making a newer version of it now. You can go back it. And there's also a brand new Extend book in that campaign, Extend Respawn. I did buy a few of the books just so I would have some, but that's it. They were just, from my understanding, they were incinerated. There's a lot of shady dealings with Image. I've heard from other creators. Me and Kelsey Shannon had talked about it from time to time, and there was something weird going on at Image, where there were some people that I never got a clear story that were let go, that were really good people at Image, I thought, but they were let go. Like, I don't want to say it was embezzling, but there's something weird where certain creators, there was something in question with what Image actually sold. I don't, like, you only know the numbers they give you. It's not like you can go in and get like an accountant or something to go investigate their books or their warehouse or whatever. There's a term for that, but it's escaping me.
like an audit.
Audit, yeah, an audit. Yeah, it's not like you can go do an audit. So there's some, I don't know. But from my understanding, they were destroyed, a lot of them. Cause of Comicsgate, whatever. So go back the new version.
Yeah, we
already
got
did.
we got the link on the description of the show too. So
Yep.
thank you so much, Travis, for your question
You're
and for
welcome.
being on here tonight.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good
Appreciate
seeing
it.
you, Travis.
And Shane, thank you for answering my question. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, you're welcome, Travis. Always good
All
seeing
right.
you.
All right.
All right.
See you too.
Have a great night, bud.
Bye.
All right, and so that's it. We're going to be ending in about a minute. Valdez, thank you so much for the 20 super chat there. Mexican, I believe, says, Shane, if you keep doing comics, I promise to read them.
I appreciate that,
There you
Travis. Or I'm sorry, not Travis, Valdez, D. Frank. Yeah, I mean, I plan to keep doing books. I don't want people to think, Shane's saying he's giving up on comics. I'm just saying this is a sink or swim scenario, and I'm not scared of doing another job.
I think it's honestly just it's a realistic viewpoint. It's just that's all it is. Most
Yeah.
people don't express that viewpoint, but you are. So, kudos to you for doing that. I think there's a lot of people who either feel that way and haven't said it yet, or have felt that way, and maybe people don't realize where they're at with it. But like you said, you're giving everything. If you're giving your all, and it doesn't work out, and you're like, I don't know what I got left. I mean, you're being honest, but let's also be honest too. People really enjoy your work, and people are supporting you. So let's hope that continues to happen. You got a lot of great ideas. You're very talented, and obviously, I think you got a long future in comics.
I hope so. But again, I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Yeah,
Like,
I
this
hear you.
it's my best on the board, and I'm doing it until I can.
Everybody, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate you. If you enjoy the show, give it a thumbs up. If you like the content on this channel, if you like these interviews, we have almost every day, 5 to 6 days a week. Please make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. Before we go, Shane, where can they find you?
Talking and Drawing with Shane Davis. Go sub to it. We do a show every week called Ballers with me, Mandy, and Dale Keown that rotates back and forth. Go check that out. We also do Pimp My Comic, where we promo new campaigns, some in demand. Usually it has to be live though. Like we don't do signups. So we do that like I think twice a month, usually on Wednesday nights. And I am on EBS's channel quite a bit. You go sub to it also. With Ethan, I'm usually on for Comicsgate Kings.
There you go. And where would you care to direct them to at this point in time?
Is anybody on? I don't know. Where would I direct them to? Let me go look.
I was thinking more in terms of your books and your site.
Yeah. Nine Lives.
But you can do that too if you want to direct
well,
someone to
actually, like ninelivescomics.com, we have Extend Level Up right now. It's a campaign you can back. There are 2 books: Extend Respawn, Extend Level Up. Extend Level Up has 4 artists working on it: Kelsey Shannon, Monica, Donald DeLay, and Kelsey Shannon. So it's a pretty cool book. Also, for people that are unaware, ninelivescomics.com, you can buy ready-made books, and I think we're going to do a Black Friday sale. So that's always good. We're probably going to give a code on our ready-made stuff that you'll be able to use for a discount. Not our $25 Tampa Bay comic books. I usually try to keep backers. I'm trying not to undercut you guys, so those will remain $25. Any CGC stuff that we're adding to the site or older material, we're thinking about doing a discount code that'll go out to everybody.
Oh, very nice. All right. Well, all the links are in the description of the show, guys, so go check all that out. Go sub to Shane on YouTube. Check out Accent Volume 1. And, check out Shane's site, ninelivescomics.com. There you go. Yeah, SDA. Yeah. All right, everybody, take it easy. Have a wonderful night. Shane, thank you so much for your time tonight. Unbelievably generous. 2 hours and 13 minutes. Holy smokes. It was a great chat, and thank you so much. Everybody, have a wonderful evening. I'll see you guys Tuesday night. And until then, have a wonderful night and an even better tomorrow. See you guys.
Take care.